right? So here's a yes, it's early. The keyboard hates me. Always use test@test.com so I never forget. Right, so here's a dynamic page. So this is doing everything, right? It's got the HTML and CSS, so it's the view. It also has, if we looked at the code, it also does the model part of connecting to the database and sending an SQL query to get data from a movies table. And then we've got the PHP script that does the controlling, that does all the logic part, right? So this one single PHP page, right now, it's performing all three of these functions. We build one page to do it. When we build node applications, or any application using the MVC pattern, we break out the presentation from the data operations from the logic. And those actually all go into separate files that are linked together. What would be some of the reasons or some of the benefits of using this kind of architecture as opposed to just creating a page that does all of it?
In case something breaks.
Okay, yep, explain a bit more. Absolutely. Why? How's this helpful if something breaks?
So it may not be like interdependent, or you can catch it before it's happening. You're not sending everything at once.
Absolutely, it makes debugging easier, right? If we have a data error, well, we just go into the model file. We don't have to bother looking here or here. So that would be one benefit. What else would be a benefit of breaking this structure up into three separate files? What if we were working in a team environment? How does this structure help?
So each person can do a specific work.
Right. The front-end developer really just works on the views. They don't need to access the model files at all. Whoever's in charge, so we can divide the labor easily, and we're not working all on those the same files. Right? The front-end developer's working here, back-end developer's here, database person's working here. So that's useful. Anything else? Any other advantages you could see from this structure? What about reusability? How does this architecture help us in that respect?
Serve out the same information on a different, well, you can serve out different information on the same visual end of stuff.
Okay, so let's say we have a public side and an admin side, right? Both of them need to be able to see orders. Well, if we build this where everything's jammed in all at once, we're going to repeat that code on two separate pages, right? If we have to change it, we're going to have to change it in two places. Here, if we have a model file that queries the database and gets a list of orders, well, if we change what that query looks like, it only lives here. And then any view that uses it is going to get that same update. It also makes testing easier because we can test these components in isolation. Or if we build something, let's say we build a component that we might want to use across multiple sites. Let's say we build let's say we have newsletters. Well, if we build a model and controller for newsletters for one site, we put a view on it for that client. Well, suddenly if we want to reuse that code in another application, we can just import the model and the controller to a different application. All we need to do is put new views on it. We can reuse that code from one application to another. Okay. So it's not particular on any particular technology. It's really a pattern or a structure. So the way that this looks like when the end user requests a page, so the user sends a request by URL to the server. The controller tries to interpret that URL, and this is where that express framework comes in. We look at the URL and we decide what page to load. It's not automatic like it is just with static HTML files, where the server just simply serves out the address of the page, the name of the page the user types in. We can actually do this ourselves. That's what I'm doing right here. If we have a GET request in our root folder, we want to show the view called index. That's what this code in Node and Express means. So we have full control over what our URLs look like. It's easy to generate friendly URLs like this. So MVC request comes in, the controller decides what to do. Maybe we need data, so it connects to the database, it goes through the model and might fetch some data. And then it comes back and determines what view are we going to load, and it passes the data to the view. So the user at the end sees an HTML page with whatever dynamic content has come out of our database. And maybe we're using Angular for that, maybe we're not. So this is kind of where we're going. This is what our applications will look like. So here's one. Actually, if I open one, I could show you let me open a better one. Let me open one that has some data in it. Let's go here. So here's what the structure will actually look like. So this little application was just a simple create, read, update, and delete using a one-table database where it was for creating and managing articles in a database. So we can see how this breaks down into model, view, and controller. We have a model folder, and here's our article model that basically describes this is what an article looks like in our database. So we create a schema with 3 fields, a created, and the data type, a title, and the content for an article. And then we just make this public.
What's Mongoose?
We'll talk about that later. It's just used for it's used as an interface to talk to MongoDB. It's basically a library for connecting Node to a MongoDB database. So this tells our application, hey, this is what an article looks like. It does similar thing to what we used with ASP.NET when we used the entity framework, if you remember. We created those diagrams where we had model classes representing our tables. Then we had our views. So a view that showed all the articles might look like this. So we've got some HTML combined with some server-side variables. And then sitting in between, here was the root file. So on our home page, when the user went to the root folder, we were going to use our model to find all the articles. We were going to load our view called index, and we were going to pass in the results of our query. So this is broken up into 3 separate files. And then we have a dynamic web page that looks kind of similar to this one, really, but where we've broken these things out into separate files and separate pieces rather than just jamming all the code in one place. So one of the nice things about learning to use the mean stack in this course, learning how MVC works, is all MVC, this pattern is the same no matter what the technology is. So once you understand MVC and you're out job hunting and you can put MVC on your resume as one of the technologies that you know, you can walk in and you can do MVC with anything. So long as you learn the language, you understand the architecture and the pattern. They're all going to be similar to what we do in here. So for example, when we did ASP.NET, we didn't use MVC with ASP.NET, but after this course, if you were to go back and try and learn it, there's some really good tutorials on Microsoft's site, it would be easy for you because you already understand the .NET framework in C# and how ASP.NET works, and when this class is done, you're going to be familiar and comfortable with MVC pattern. So to go ahead and use that kind of technology will be easy for you, just putting together 2 things you already know. Okay, so that's most of what you need to know. I'm just going to see if I can show you a student project that was built last year. Yeah, here's one. So one of the things you're going to do in our Thursday class in Project Studio, you're actually going to build a real application. Now for that application, we'll talk more about it on Thursday. You can actually use any technology you want. I don't care. I'm not going to tell you you have to use this or you have to use that. So last year, for Project Studio. The students did a project for the School of Engineering. It was a research project in conjunction with the electric vehicle charging station outside of a building. They were building an application so the users who use that are to be logging their use of the charging station. So some of the students used ASP.NET, some of them used PHP, and some of them actually decided, well, it was a good idea to practice what they were learning in this class, so they used the mean stack. So this is actually a kind of a mobile, designed as a mobile-friendly app. So these guys used Node.js. They hosted it in the cloud on Heroku. So the college is actually using it. Oh boy, I can't remember if I still. So they built the full administrative panel. They've used Angular for these kind of this kind of messaging. So they used Angular for these sorts of things. So this is this was a good project. I mean, this was the one of all the ones that were used. Few of the students actually got paid when the class was over by the engineering department. They got a bursary to finish this and actually launch this. So this is kind of an example of what you can do and what I think you guys will be able to do with the mean stack by the time we're done.
So that software is in the fuel thing?
It's not directly in there because the charging station comes with its own software, but what they ask is when people charge that they basically register here, and what they put in there, once you've put in your license plate, when you come back it recognizes you. You don't have to log in every time. You just put in your license plate and it asks you like what's your current odometer reading, how long are you going to be at the college, and then when you leave it's asking you to also check again. So they're trying to get a sense of who's using the charging station, how long are they here for, and what percentage of their battery is getting charged while they're at the college. And then they're trying to use this data because PowerStream has basically put that in and given that to the college kind of as a pilot project, as an experiment. And they're looking at where else they may want to put these charging stations in. So they're talking about putting them, should they put them like on the en routes, on the highways? Should they put them in shopping malls?
Like not at Target?
So we're trying to gather some information about who's using the station and how it's being used so they can make intelligent decisions about where to put them, you know, and are there enough of them, etc. So these students, a couple of groups used the mean stack to build out these applications. Okay. So I think we've covered most things here. The other thing I'll just mention, so the benefits of using Node. One, it's so few people have mentioned, it's super fast. The code is asynchronous, so we can do multiple things at the same time. It's also fast when we work with MongoDB because our data, basically our entire application is JavaScript, right? We can write client-side JavaScript, JavaScript on the server, and our data is in JavaScript format as well. So we can leverage our knowledge of JavaScript, and we don't have to kind of knit together all these different technologies. It's JavaScript through the whole stack. It runs well in the cloud. We'll talk more about the cloud a bit later. And it's platform independent. It will run on anything. And also everything is free and open source, right? To download and install Node, a code editor, away you go. So there's no cost, there's no barrier to entry. Okay. Anybody have any questions about anything you saw on here? Okay. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you, I'm just going to pause my recording. Now I realize in that little video we saw a bunch of code, we haven't really looked at any Node code, so some of that stuff didn't make sense. That's okay when he was doing HTTP and create server. We'll get into that. What I really wanted you to see was his example of how Node allows us to write async. So asynchronous or non-blocking code, those mean the same thing. right? So the idea that our application can do something and at the same time can continue on and do other things while we wait for that first process to finish. So that's really where Node kind of shines and what it allows us to do that we really had no ability to do before on the web. You know, if we wanted to do some kind of process was going to take a while, we had to wait till that was done because that process was block or would be synchronous. Okay, so that's really kind of the big benefit and why the main reason that Node our Node applications tend to run so fast. Okay. Any questions on anything you heard in the video? Okay, well, here's what I would like to do then. I think we'll take a pause here. When we come back, we'll try playing around. What I want to do is we'll maybe try and write a couple of simple Node scripts that simulate the example he was talking about. We'll try one version of the code where it's blocking, and we'll see the output and how long it takes, and then we'll try to write the same code, but we'll write it in asynchronous or non-blocking fashion, and we can compare those results. So we'll write just a couple of files, so make sure you have Node installed on your machine. If you don't already, as I said, it doesn't, you know, you probably install it in about a minute. So install Node on your machine, we'll try that, and then we'll do a quick review, maybe have a quick look at GitHub, and maybe do a small, simple lab with GitHub before we go for today. Okay, so we'll take a break here. One thing I think I neglected to mention, I did put the link up here. If you want to use Visual Studio Code for this, there is an article here. It doesn't, Visual Studio Code doesn't by default include code hints for Node.js, but there's a quick hack that you can do. So once you have Visual Studio Code installed, if through the terminal, or sorry, it's not Express that we need, but down here, there's a few commands. If you run npm install and then use TypeScript, then it will enable the code hinting for Node with those by running just those few commands here. So if you want to use Visual Studio Code, that's how it'll enable it. I'm probably going to use WebStorm, but I may play around with Visual Studio Code a bit as well. Okay, so what I want to do is, so everybody has Node installed on your machine? Okay. So because we're going to be using the terminal or the command line, we want to basically put all our stuff in a directory that's easy to get to, because we're going to have to browse into there through the command prompt or terminal often. Okay, so if you're on a Mac, what I suggest you do is just inside your user directory, your USR directory, you may just want to create a subfolder called Node, because then it's easy to browse into that path with command. If you're on a PC, then what I would suggest the easiest thing to do is build a Node directory. If you go into C, users, and your username, just create a folder called Node. And we'll just put all our stuff in there.
And their user.
Users, and then the name of your user account.
Also Scott.
Yeah, the reason is when we open the command prompt in Windows, that's the directory, this directory, your user directory, this is where the command prompt opens to by default. So the easiest thing is just stick your Node folder inside of this. So to get to your command prompt in Windows, the easiest way to do it is just click the Start button and in the search, type CMD. You can also pin the command prompt to your taskbar. We're going to be using the command prompt every week, so you'll get comfortable with it. So if you're on a Mac, just open up your terminal. If you're on Windows, type CMD, hit enter. And notice on Windows, it takes you right in here into your C users and then your username directory. And if you're on a Mac, I think it also takes you right into your USR directory when you open terminal, I think is where it goes by default. So to go inside of the Node directory, I'm just going to type the command cd for change directory. So now I'm inside of my Node folder.
Push enter.
Yep, always have to hit enter in the command prompt to execute any command. if we wanted to see what's in here, the command I think is different for Mac and Windows. On Windows, if we wanted to see a list of what's in here, anybody know the command, the DOS command?
DIR.
Yep, so it's dir. On a Mac, I think the command is ls.
Yeah.
I'm learning these things as I go. So your node folder, I have a whole bunch of junk in there. Yours will be empty.
Yes.
For now.
If you want to fix your system, type rf-rf/start.
So what we'll do is, just like we've done in our other classes, we'll make a new folder for each week. So I want to make a lesson 1 directory. So the command in Windows is mkdir, I think. Make directory, lesson 1, and I'll hit enter. This will make a lesson 1 subfolder. So it doesn't take me into the folder, it just creates that folder.
Something funky is happening. It says the no file or directory.
Are you on a Mac?
Yeah.
Where, no file or directory where? You're in the terminal, you're in terminal, and what directory does it take you? What directory are you in?
CMD.exe.
No, the CMD.exe is on Windows, is a Windows thing.
Yeah, and then I did CD node because I realized it was Windows.
Does it have a nickname yet?
Okay, are you on Windows or are you on Mac? Okay. So run the command ls and tell me what you see.
Yeah, I think it worked. Stuff popped up.
Okay, good. So now to go into my lesson 1 directory, I just will type cd for change directory, lesson 1. So now we can see the file path. We're now inside our lesson 1 folder. If I do a directory command here to see what's inside the folder, there's nothing in here, right? We just created a lesson 1 folder, but there's nothing in here yet. Okay. So if I go back, if I go into it through Windows, here's Node. I could have made it through Windows, so I've just got this blank folder. But we need to start to get comfortable using the command prompt.
So that was the long way to make a lessons folder.
Yeah, we could have made it through Windows, but everything we do, all our Node apps, we have to start them from the command line.
When I type CMD into the start, there's 2 different command prompts that come up. Just regular command prompt and then Node.js command prompt.
No, just the regular one. Just the, not that we don't want the Node command prompt, just the regular Windows command prompt. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to try, as I said, we're going to try 2 simple Node files. We're going to try doing the same thing, one with synchronous code or blocking, and one with asynchronous or non-blocking code. So what we want to do, I'll just minimize the command prompt for a minute. We're going to make 2 simple text files, okay? We're just going to make 2 lists, and we're going to read those lists out. So I'm just going to go in here, make a new text file. What are we going to list in our first document? What should we list? Could be anything.
Food.
Okay, so we'll call this food.txt, and what are we going to list in our second text file? We'll create a second file.
Drinks.
That'll work. Okay, so we've got food and we've got drinks. So I'm just going to open these 2 files up and let's add a few items to each file. Okay. So I'll open up food. What'd you have? What have you eaten today?
Chicken pot pie.
Coffee.
Well, that can go in the drinks. Chicken pot pie. What else we can put in our food?
Oatmeal.
Sorry, Katie. What was that?
Avocado.
All right. Anything else? Give,
Cake.
Toast.
So we're opening this in
any text editor, doesn't matter. Anything else we want to put in here? I had a bagel for breakfast.
I had ice cream.
All right. So just put a few items in the list and save it.
okay.
Then open up your drinks. Let's add a few drinks. I heard coffee. What else should we put in here?
Tea.
Yep. Let's put a few more items in.
You can put spaces. Yeah.
No, put each one on a new line, not spaces. Anything else? Mallory, what are you drinking?
Rockstar.
All right. That's good enough. Doesn't really matter so long as we got 4 or 5 items in each list. It doesn't matter really what your items say. So I'll close those files.
So 5 for each one, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter, give or take. It would the example would probably be more effective if the lists were huge. If we had hundreds, we'd see a bigger difference in the output, but we're still going to see a difference in the output when we do a blocking version versus a non-blocking version. Okay. So now if you want to open up any code editor, it could be any text editor really. So I'm going to go and I'll just kind of start WebStorm from the beginning here. So what I'm going to do is just say open, and I'll browse to my node folder, and I'll choose the lesson 1 folder I just created and click OK.
So,
Just clicked open project and browse to the lesson 1 folder that's in C users, my username, node.
What would you do for Visual Studio? Just open folder?
Yep. So here it'll give us a list of files on the left, so it has our 2 text files and then our code editors here. We can also minimize or close this little file explorer, make it smaller if we want to. So we're going to write 2 different JavaScript files. We'll call the first one blocking, and we'll call the second one non-blocking, and then we'll use Node to run them. Okay. So I'm just going to, on my project, right-click and choose New JavaScript File. Or in your editor, you can just make a new file.
How do you do that in Visual? It's the same.
Just File and New File. So I'll make a new JavaScript file, and I'll call this one blocking. And by default, if I choose JavaScript, it'll give it the right extension. So what we want to do is we want to read the contents of our 2 files and then print them out, and as well print out a couple messages. Okay. So the first thing we need to do, if we want to read any files on our file system, we're going to need to link to one of Node's built-in libraries, which is the file system library. So anytime we want to access the file system for reading or writing files, we'll need to link to this. The good news is linking to a file or including a library in Node is exactly the way you would do it in PHP, or almost exactly. You remember we had a few functions in PHP for linking one file to another. What options did we have? Remember if we wanted to include like a header file or an external file in our page. We could use include once, or what were the other options? Or require once. So in Node, the function for linking an external file in is require. So what we'll do is we're going to create a variable. In PHP, our variables were prefixed with a $sign. In Node, we just put in the word, or in Java, because it's JavaScript, we just put in var. We'll create a variable called, whoops, and this shouldn't be I should comment. So link to the file system module. Comment first, and again, of course, this is just JavaScript, so JavaScript comments apply. So we'll create a variable. So So this just gives us a link to Node's file system module that's used for reading and writing files. And just like in client-side JavaScript, our variable has no data type. All variables are just of type var. So we'll open and read the food list. So we'll create a second variable called food. And we'll use our file system variable and what we want to do is call a method read file. What file are we reading? We're reading food.txt, and we have to just specify the encoding type on the file. So this will open up that text document and read the contents of that file into a variable we've called food. So that. So now what we want to do is print the list of food items. So we're not even going to load, we're not using the browser at all today. We're simply going to use the command prompt or the terminal to run this and see the output. So if we want to display the output in the command prompt or the terminal, we use this command in Node, console.log. So it's like an echo command in PHP. So we want to just output our food variable to the console. Then we'll print a message. So we'll use a second console log, and we'll say printing the food here. So all we're doing is opening that text file, reading the contents, printing the contents out, and printing out a message. Now we can run this file through our command prompt right now. As I said, we don't need the browser. We can execute it. So if we go back to our command prompt, we should make sure that Node is installed. The easy way to make sure that Node is running, all our commands in Node start with the word Node. So the easiest way to check to make sure that Node is working is simply to type the command node space and then -v. The V stands for version. So if we run this command and Node has been installed properly, it should print out the current version number installed on our system.
What was the typed in after the last console.log? Oh,
Just a message.
okay.
Can say anything really, Scott, doesn't really matter. So if I run node space -v, I haven't updated my Node from last semester. You guys, if you've installed it, you're probably all on version 5. 4.2, I think. So the latest version, I should probably update mine. 5.4 is the latest. But as long as you get something here, that's fine. They made a big jump. They were in, like last spring, they were in version 0.12. And in fall, they went to version 4. It's a bit strange. So all of the major releases now are starting with numbers. It's no longer the minor releases. Okay, so as long as you've got V something here, Node's working.
So what do we type? Sorry.
Node space -v. And just make sure it gives you V and a number. So to actually try our JavaScript file, if we type node and then the name of our JavaScript file, it'll actually run the script right here. We don't need the browser. Oh, because I made a mistake in my code. So notice it did print this out, but we got undefined because I used the wrong function. Wasn't very smart. Okay. Instead of using read file, remember this is our blocking or synchronous version. I used the wrong method. What we actually want is to use a method called read file sync. So this is the blocking code. So I'll just add the word sync on the end. And I'll try it again. Oops. Now in the command prompt, there is a way to rerun the last command you run. Does anybody know what it is? So you don't have to type it again. You want to,
Upward key.
yeah, or